I played a fantasy RPG that doesn't use stats. No strength to bend bars. No charisma to Riz the dragon. Is that it? Is that the D&D meme now? Not even armor class or HP or any numbers for skills or any normal definitions for spells and abilities. And if you're like me, mostly familiar with Dungeons and Dragons or its many, many offspring, you're probably as confused as I was when I first sat down to play this game, or whenever I hear new slang from Gen Z or Alpha. Why am I an old man? But if that's true, then by only watching this video, you will reach the same epiphany about creating RPG characters that I did. No promises about understanding slang, because I'm Bob. This is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together, and this story begins with a familiar problem. How to go from, this game looks cool, but I have no experience with it, to, I'm confidently ready to run this game. By the way, it's called Legend in the Mist, Rustic Fantasy RPG, meaning a gritty yet cozy kind of folklorish feel, and the publisher is sponsoring this video to spread the word about their totally Poggers sale. That's a good thing. Their amazing sale and special bundles for the core book and Acorn dice set in a faux leather scroll. The last chance to get early bird pricing is this November, ending after Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and you should use my referral link below so they know who sent you. But overall, the publisher wants to spread the word about how Legend in the Mist is bringing something new to the fantasy RPG scene. And even if you don't love how it achieves that, this design will give you new ideas to play around with. That promise is what caught my attention, along with its beautiful artwork. And yeah, it's huge success on Kickstarter, but catching attention. Tripping all over the place here, I really don't have any stats. But catching attention and even selling a lot of books doesn't solve that first problem of preparing you to actually play the game. So fortunately, Legend in the Mist also stands out for providing a solution here, a free solo adventure. You may have seen my video playing through this comic book style tutorial where you play a young hunter desperately chasing a cure for his mother's illness, an eerily sudden illness at that, but no spoilers here, besides that the tutorial worked. I came out of it with enough confidence to run the game, and with a few new problems. But nature break for the first earthworm I've ever run into while shooting one of these videos. These guys are an invasive species delivered here hundreds of years ago by our European settlers, but turned out to be kind of a huge boon for soil here. Okay, I just Googled it. They are invasive, but it is not widely agreed upon that it was a good thing, actually. Never mind. Back to the video. Problem 1. Is that the no stats game design puts a little pressure on the game master and players, and we will absolutely revisit this later because this leads to our big epiphany. 2, the rulebook is too big. I promise I can read, but yeah, you'll see what I mean when we get to the mechanics. And 3, the tutorial adventure doesn't teach you one important part of running the game: character creation. Or so I thought. And this isn't the big epiphany, but it's like a stepping stone to that. You see what we're doing. We're telling a story here. Okay. So the whole idea behind this no stats game design is that your character is instead made up of, bear with me, words, not numbers or thoroughly defined features. These words are called tags, and any one tag, fundamentally, is just a thing that is true about your character. So you might have a tag called skilled with a bow, which does exactly what you think it does, but you might have another tag called father's yew bow, because even though it's a piece of equipment on a fundamental level, having that piece of equipment is a true thing about your character. And while using the tags of this modern narrative game feels simple and creative, like old school D&D, your Legend in the Mist character is a lot more than a wizard with one spell and a dream. No, you have a lot of unique tags organized into 4 themes, more like how a 5e D&D character has a lot of stats and features organized into their class, subclass, species, and background. Thus, here's a hopefully not terrible example of how this game's tags work with the core role, bridging the gap from your knowledge of D&D. My dwarf adventurer, whomst I will name Grosh Jobin, is trying to No, never again, never again. Grosh is trying to flee a collapsing dungeon, but uh-oh, the final bridge ahead is broken. He's got to leap across a small chasm to escape. So, I'm gonna need to roll 2d6 and add any relevant tags, GM permitting, foreshadowing what we'll discuss later. We get +1 for dark vision, because it is true that he can see clearly in the shadows. Definitely +1 for stone cunning, and maybe +1 for dwarven toughness, because he has the endurance to make this final push, and if we're feeling lucky, maybe add his weakness tag too. -1 for can't jump, because it is true, and using weaknesses is part of how you get more powerful. So, here we go. And we'll see how our friend Grosh does in a minute. My point here is that the tutorial adventure for Legend in the Mist teaches you all that and more, but with a pre-gen character. But it turns out that's 95% of what you need to know to build a character in Legend in the Mist. Here's the other 5%. The first method of character creation is just making up your own tags of true things like I did for Grosh. You write 4 themes, each with a title tag, 2 power tags, and a weakness tag, and a quest to get your character moving, +1 backpack tag. That can be equipment for really any other temporary boon that doesn't fit one of your main themes. Next, the book provides 120 theme kits, each with a title, about 9 suggested power tags, 4 weaknesses, and a quest, so you can easily and quickly piece together a unique character. Finally, the book provides 30 character tropes to get you playing even faster, with everything from the village gossip to the demon abjurer or the dread vampire. Yeah, wild feature of this game is how you can have characters of different power levels in the same party, equally impacting the story. The example often cited is Lil Guy Frodo and ancient demigod Gandalf, but who was more important to the story of the Lord of the Rings? That might make a good video topic. And speaking of Lord of the Rings, your character's fellowship is one additional theme they have when playing with a party, and every character shares those fellowship tags. Now, if you couldn't tell, the rules are very simple. So all of those character options are part of what makes the rulebook a little longer than I typically prefer in an RPG, but the rest of the content is mostly guidance for players and GMs on how to build a great story together and how to navigate the nuances of the one huge problem TM that you may have noticed in our little example, and which will lead to our big epiphany about designing RPG characters. So to illustrate, let's check back in on our dwarven pal, Grosh Jobin. We're rolling 2d6 to leap the gap and escape the dungeon, +2 from our tags, and boom. It's a 7, so Jobin succeeds with a consequence, and the GM describes as the dwarf makes this rough landing, forming a crack through his spear. Now, there are additional mechanics, not just guidance for how this cracked spear is true, and may affect the character's roles going forward, as well as for how a player can mitigate this consequence. But the problem, or really the challenge that new players might face with games like Legend in the Mist, is its major simplification and innovation without a thorough definition for how each tag can or cannot apply. It's up to interpretation. So the player and the GM might have to reason out and agree which tags can or cannot apply for every action. This is what I meant by simple and creative, like old school D&D or modern narrative games. Both are all about using your imagination and letting the GM, as referee, decide what makes sense. It's why I love the gear limitations of Shadowdark and the mighty deeds of Dungeon Crawl Classics and the experiences of Daggerheart. But many players and GMs can be apprehensive about how no definition, all interpretation could lead to players and GMs trying to take advantage of each other and spoil the fun. I saw this in the comments on my last video about Legend in the Mist. However, by playing this game, where it's taken to the extreme, because some degree of interpretation is required for every action, I realized that the lack of a definition is not the problem. All right, this might make me really bad at YouTube to do a nature break as our videos kind of reaching the crescendo, but check this out. So earlier I heard a deer snorting but couldn't see it, and it was right here making this scrape. It's prints everywhere, even our fresh antler rub on this little sapling right here. This guy was claiming his territory. And yeah, good spot for a buck, because he's even got acorns all over the place. Bringing us back to our acorn dice set for Legend in the Mist. Saved it. The real problem is something you've seen yourself probably countless times in debates online, hopefully not at your table, but it's when people will bicker and even fight over the interpretation of a very long definition for a game mechanic. Therefore, my game design epiphany is this. Players and game masters are faster to agree on what is true about a character and a situation when there's a number tied to it, whether it's a statistic or a dice roll or both. And this should sound incredibly simple because every epiphany is. This is the distilled version of every debate you've ever seen between rulings versus rules, rules light versus rules heavy, narrative versus crunch. It's all about how language is flexible, but numbers are not. Subjectivity versus objectivity. So, RPG characters like the ones in this game with no stats may lead to more debate at the table depending on the personality of your fellow players. But no stats will lead to more creativity at the table regardless of personality because narrative is all you have. To summarize all of that, this playstyle is optimization without crunch. And if you'd like to see me both embrace and grapple with this type of character design while playing the solo tutorial for Legend in the Mist, check out this video on your screen or use the link below to download the free PDF. Thanks to our patrons and to our YouTube channel members for directly supporting what I do, and keep building.